Placid5 here, and today I'm going to be ranking all the 2024 movies I saw last year from worst to best in tier list fashion. As usual, S means superior, one of the best movies of the year, and F means the movie absolutely sucked and it deserves to be at the bottom. Now, these are just all my opinion, but I'd love to know below if you guys agree, disagree. These are all the movies that I saw. I know I'm missing a couple. I definitely want to see The Substance, and I want to see A Real Pain. Those are two movies that I really want to watch that I wasn't able to get to, at least not until the making of this video. So again, bear with me. It doesn't seem like a lot of movies, but I think these are a lot of the main ones. Now, when I cover these, I'm gonna completely stay clear from spoilers, so you don't have to worry about that. But let me know which movies you guys really loved from last year. So without further ado, let's get to it. Alright, so first off, we have Carry On. Now, this movie came out last month in December, so it's really actually new, and it's the #1 movie on Netflix, or was for a while. And this is your typical popcorn sort of blockbuster action movie. So it stars Taron Egerton as our lead TSA agent, and then we have Jason Bateman as his counterpart, as sort of the villain terrorist type. And this was actually pretty interesting because Jason Bateman really doesn't play these villain type of characters, so I was pretty interested in seeing how he was going to pull it off, and I think he did a pretty decent job. So this movie pretty much follows a TSA agent that has a phone thing in his ear, this audio device, and he's basically being told what to do. It's kind of one of those movies, phone booth, speed, kind of like you're being directed what to do, and if you don't do it, something's going to happen to someone you love, something like that. It's tense at moments, it's pretty fun. The whole movie's really fun, actually. It's your typical action thriller. The only thing I didn't like about it, other than it being really cliche, it really checks all the boxes of what you'd come to expect from the ending, the beginning, just everything that happens throughout it. It's very predictable a lot of the time, and there's a lot of tropes, obviously. It's, again, your standard action movie. But one of the things that I really take off points for this movie is the realism is completely just, this movie is basically a fantasy movie, how unrealistic it is. There's so many hilarious moments that things are happening in broad daylight where nobody's seeing. There's 100 different ways that this movie could have ended before it even got to the halfway point. But again, I'm not expecting it to be realistic or anything, but it's laughable a lot of the time. But honestly, I thought it was pretty fun. So for what it is, for the entertainment value, I'd put it at a B-. Honestly, almost a C+, but I had fun with it, and I thought that there was some good visuals as well. Alright, next is Sing Sing. So this was a little more of an indie type movie, and they say this technically came out in 2023. I don't know about that, though. It had a US release in 2024, so it's on the list. And this movie is basically following a theater group in sort of a prison, which is a pretty interesting concept. It's probably one of the more humanistic, feel-good type of movies that I saw this past year. I really enjoyed the performances. So Coleman Domingo is the lead. I think he did a brilliant job, honestly. He's a very subtle actor, one of those actors that it seems effortless. Like, their acting is very much done in the facial expressions and everything like that. So it's a very simplistic story, but it totally just encapsulates you. It's very immersive. The performances are so raw and just so believable. And I think that's due to the fact that a lot of these actors, if you want to call them that, are actually playing themselves. At the end of the movie, in the credits, you can see so-and-so plays themselves, basically. So, and you can really feel that. It does feel like people actually interacting in real life, even in a prison setting like that. And it's really cool to see how these people that are convicted for different things actually are able to release themselves through the art, through theater, and it's slow at times, but it's extremely grounded, and it's just a feel-good movie, just well done, and one of those really artistic movies that I would say is worth the watch. So I enjoyed it, honestly. I would also put Sing Sing up at B+. This one is a B+. So it's above Carry On. I know what this looks like already. Two drastically different movies, but I like them both. I like them both for different reasons. Alright, next up we have Conclave. Now, this movie, and I just made a video on it actually a couple days ago, particularly the ending of it. So this movie follows the death of the Pope, and they basically have to appoint a new Pope. And that's sort of how the entire premise of the movie, they have to go through a voting process, and there's a political aspect of it as well, obviously a religious aspect. and it's sort of the drama involved and trying to figure out who's going to be the next pope. It's a big, tall order, and they sort of use that to propel the story with the different characters and the different dynamics. And the ending, obviously I'm not going to go into it, but there is sort of this twist, quote-unquote twist ending that they have in it, and I wasn't a fan of it. I thought that it really came out of left field. I understood the ending, I just thought that it kind of came out of nowhere, and maybe that was the whole point of it, but I didn't really like that part of it. The movie visually looks beautiful, stunning, the performances are amazing. Ralph Fiennes does an amazing job at his role, and Stanley Tucci does a really good job. Just everybody in the movie acts very well, and there's some, again, beautiful shots and stuff. And it is intriguing, but it is very slow. I feel like it does take a while to get started, and then the ending left a lot to be desired, in my opinion. So wasn't a huge fan. I don't hate the movie, but also it could have been something more, in my opinion. And maybe it's just because I really didn't like the ending at all. So because of that, I'm going to be putting Conclave at a very fitting C. Conclave, C for Conclave. Alright, next up we have Immaculate. So Sydney Sweeney's sort of debut at horror, if I'm not mistaken. So this movie I saw way earlier in 2024, but from what I remember, it basically follows this nun. So she gets there and she ends up becoming pregnant, and nobody put a baby inside her. She just became pregnant, and because of that, these priests and everything, they kind of see that, and then these nuns, they kind of see that as a sign, some kind of biblical sign of some kind, a demonic force, if anything. So that kind of like is the whole premise of it. Personally, I didn't really like this movie at all. I thought that it was pretty slow, and the actual scary aspects of it were pretty predictable, and it's just not very memorable of a movie, to be honest. It left a lot to be desired. I think Sydney Sweeney is okay, throughout it. I'm pretty surprised that she was even in this movie, to be honest. I feel like she could be very good for horror, but in this one, I don't know. It was an interesting concept for her to be part of, or anybody, to be honest. But it just sort of drags its feet through the plot line, and then at the very end, it kind of picks up a little bit, but again, I thought the ending was also sort of lackluster, and then left a lot to be desired. So I wish I liked this movie more. I wish it kind of was more memorable. It could have been something cool, but in my opinion, I think Immaculate goes at the D tier. Just not very good. Next we have Monkey Man. So this was the actor Dev Patel's directorial debut, and he also stars in it. He's also the lead. So it's one of those situations. Honestly, this was a movie that really went under a lot of people's radars, and I would implore you and encourage you, if you like John Wick, if you like the Raid movies, if you like any movies like that with lots of great action set pieces, martial arts, you really like that, Monkey Man is the movie. So it's very much your typical revenge kind of story from the ground up, and this takes place in India, but honestly, it's some of the coolest action sequences of this year. I think the choreography, the visuals are really cool, and I really got a good vibe from it. I really thought that Dev Patel really did a great job as his first movie directing. I think that this was a great debut, and this was one of the more memorable ones. I definitely would not mind seeing this again. It's just very, very memorable. So if you like those movies, this is a very good, solid, well choreographed, visually stunning action movie that's definitely worth checking out. I'd be putting Monkey Man at the A- tier. I think that's a good place to put it. Definitely recommend it. Next we have probably one of the more weirder movies of this year, and that is Kinds of Kindness by Yorgos Lanthimos. So this director just came out with Poor Things the year before, and I believe he had been working on this movie for a while, but this eventually came out this last year. So it pretty much is 3 separate stories, so it's kind of like an anthology. 3 small short stories told with the exact same actors. So Jesse Plemons, Emma Stone, Willem Dafoe, and Margaret Qualley, and Hong Chow. Basically all those actors I just named show up in all three of the movies, and they each sort of are symbolic of different things. So I know a lot of people didn't like this movie. I really liked it, actually. I thought that it was very well done, very great acting. It really just shows how these particular actors I just named, especially Emma Stone, Willem Dafoe, and Jesse Plemons, it really shows how they're able to shapeshift into these different roles, different characters, especially three drastically different situations going on at the same time. It's very impressive. So for that, I give them major props. But I think that Yorgos is one of those directors where you're gonna expect some weirdness from him, but you're also going to be immersed, and you know that there's going to be more than meets the eye. And I kind of like those movies, as long as they don't go too weird. There's some very strange moments in this movie. The whole entire sort of vibe of it is kind of unsettling and confusing. But again, I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. I thought the first story was very good, and the last one's also pretty good. But it just keeps you on your toes and wondering what's going to happen next. And it takes these sharp turns and totally messes with the audience by showing certain things that are happening and in weirdly and confusing ways. But I liked it. I honestly thought it was really good. If the second two stories were a little as strong as the first one, I think I would have put this even higher. But I really did enjoy this movie. I'm putting it up at a B+, bordering on an A. That might confuse some people, but hey, I enjoyed it. Next up, we have Anora. So this is probably one of my favorite movies of the year, honestly, if not my favorite. But this is Sean Baker's director Sean Baker's movie. He did The Florida Project, he's done Red Rocket, he's just done several different movies. I think he's one of the best kind of up and coming, maybe not up and coming now, he's been around for a while, but one of those directors that I still feel like hasn't gotten the credit he deserves. Anora follows this stripper basically that falls in love with this really rich Russian basically teen young adult, and what ensues is this crazy journey that takes place over like a day or so. And I don't want to give up too much, but the acting, the performances are just excellent from everybody in the cast. Personally, I think that Mikey Madison is definitely an actress to look out for. She plays the lead. She nailed it. She absolutely nails it. She is electric throughout the whole movie. I think the cinematography is beautiful throughout it. It's very much like Uncut Gems. And this movie might not appeal to everybody, but if you like movies like Uncut Gems where they are just go, 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 you know what I mean? Like they are on speed mode at all times, and once it gets going, it doesn't stop. It doesn't even allow you a moment to breathe. Once it gets past the halfway point, this movie just speeds, and I like that. It takes you on this journey, and you can't look away, and you don't know what's going to happen next. And the implications in the very end is also very poetic, very, very effective at the very end. I think that it just left a lasting impression, and a lot of movies, this was a pretty long movie, being 2 hours and 19 minutes, but when I say that this movie could have gone for another hour, I would not have minded. This was one of those movies that I was not looking at the time. I was fully immersed in it, fully invested. Even if the characters aren't even likable, I was just invested in how it was done, how it was written, how it was directed, how it looks, and everything, how it was acted. I was totally invested in it, and I could have watched another hour of it. So Anora, I love Anora, excellent movie. I'm gonna be putting this, I really want to put it at an S tier. I'm gonna put it at an S-, bordering on an A+, somewhere in between there. I really like this movie a lot. Next, we have A Complete Unknown, which basically is the Bob Dylan biopic. So Timothée Chalamet, he is Bob Dylan in the movie. Great casting. He is excellent in it, along with everybody playing alongside him. Whoever they casted for Johnny Cash, incredible. The actor who played Johnny Cash looked exactly like him. Big props to him. Edward Norton's really good. Elle Fanning is also very good in it. So some great performances. I'm not a huge fan of biopics, to be honest. I think that biopics are very pigeon-held by their premise, by their subject matter, if you will. So, you can't really go much further than Bob Dylan's story, and he doesn't have the most exciting story, but obviously he's super influential to rock and roll, to folk and all that. So obviously being as influential as he is, I can definitely see why they would want to tell a story. And he's just a very unique individual, you know what I mean? He's just one of those people that is very one of himself. And that's very rare, so I can see why they wanted to tell a story. I thought the performances are really good. The movie's very quality. Again, the era, that period, they do a great job at really showcasing what it was like being there in that time and how people reacted to certain music at that time. That was really cool to see. But again, the performances really carry it. Timothée Chalamet, again, great Bob Dylan, looked just like him, sounded just like him. He also sang in it, which was impressive. He does sound like him, looked like him, and sang like him. So, great casting in that part. But again, I mean, it isn't the most exciting movie. It doesn't have so many memorable moments in it. I feel like, again, nothing against the artist that created it, but I don't know if I will remember this movie in 2-3 months from now. But that's just me. But as it is, it's a quality movie. So I'm not going to put it at the C tier, but it's not A for me. So B. I think somewhere in the middle, just straight B, is a good place to put it. Alright, next up we have Flow. This is another sort of indie animated movie by the name of Flow. It's French. It's relatively short, but it's such a simple yet such an effective premise. It's just a cat that gets caught up in a flood, basically. A flash flood happens, and he goes on this journey with other animals. There's a capybara, there's a bird, there's a dog, and there's not a single word of English spoken in this movie. There's no dialogue. There is none. All you have is the sounds of the animals interacting with each other, along with the nature, the water, the wind, all that stuff. But the way that they're able to make this such an emotional and immersive journey is very impressive. It has emotion to it. You feel for the animals, even when they're not talking. There's no words being spoken, but yet you feel and you can resonate with these characters, and it's very impressive the way they're able to do that. Great sound design, really great animation. It's very simplistic, but then the water and stuff look very real and very well put together. So it's an interesting combination of realism and also some simplistic art style. But again, it's just a journey. And I thought it was extremely impressive how they were able to take this simple premise and just elevate it to something that's memorable and exciting and something that's emotional and something that really touches the human spirit in a way without even having to say anything. That's very impressive and cool. So I really like Flow. I think I'm going to be putting it up at the A- tier. I think it deserves to be up there. Next up, we have Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. So this tells the origin story of Furiosa, one of the characters from Mad Max, Fury Road. So, I know people love Mad Max, and they love Mad Max Fury Road. For me, I didn't get what all the hype was around it when it came out a couple of years ago. It's been quite a while now, actually. I don't know how long it's been, but it's been quite some time since that movie came out. But I remember thinking, like, okay, I'm not really getting it. So I was like, okay, they're making a origin story now, so they're taking it back a bit to see Furiosa's backstory. So, I was like, all right. But after seeing it, I was pleasantly surprised. I thought that this movie was very solid. I thought it had great performances, really cool set pieces, really interesting story. I really like what they did with the story as well. I thought Anya Taylor-Joy was very good as Furiosa. I thought Chris Hemsworth's character, which is the villain in the movie, he was very unique in his own right as a villain, and just great action set pieces, lots of vehicular combat, lots of shooting and explosions. I really liked this movie. I thought they did a really good job on it, and I was thoroughly impressed, and I like this a lot better than Mad Max, the one before it. So, and I'm probably in the minority with that one, but truthfully, that's how I feel about it. I think it's really solid in that sense. So, yeah, Furiosa, impressive. I'm going to be putting it up at the A tier as well. Alright, so next we have In a Violent Nature. So, some may not have heard of this movie, but it's basically a horror movie that's told from the perspective of the killer. So you're following instead of following the victims of a killer, right, like Jason or any of these Halloween, where you're following the actual people that are being hunted, you're following the hunter. You're following this killer. So it's a very simple story. This guy gets basically resurrected, and he goes on a killing spree basically, and you follow him, and his main weapon of choice is a hook and other things. He's definitely your typical slasher. So, you know, the movie's pretty short, and it's simple premise. Again, you're just following him, and he's killing people. It's a really cool concept. I really like what they did with it. Really interesting cinematography, too. There's some really effective scenes when you're looking from behind him. You're looking at this big monster slasher, basically. You're following him from behind as he's approaching his victims. It makes for some tense sequences, and there's some really memorable kills. You know, I'm sure there's one in particular that a lot of people always talk about being one of the craziest kills of 2024. Although I would say Terrifier 3 takes that one, but we'll talk about that one later. But for me, the movie starts to drag and doesn't really go anywhere. It doesn't really know how to end the movie, and it doesn't really know how to, like, keep the fuel going. And the longer it goes on, it sort of started to drag somehow, even though this is supposed to be exciting and building up, but it doesn't really. And a lot of the actual kills, some of them are very low budget looking. They don't look that great. And then the movie kind of just ends up fizzling out a little bit and just leaves a lot to be desired. So I remember this one just being more slow and boring rather than interesting or something memorable like it should have been. So I don't know, this one left a lot to be desired. So in a violent nature, I'm putting it down at the D+ tier. Honestly, I can't even justify a C. I think the concept is an A concept, but execution is just a little poor. Alright, so next up we have Challengers. So Challengers is probably one of the sleekest movies of the year. So Luca Guadagnino, sorry if I said that wrong, he's an acclaimed director. So he's manning this one. And Zendaya is the lead, along with a couple of other actors in it as well. So the idea of it is that it's sort of told out of chronological order, and it's going through the relationship between Zendaya, which is a professional tennis player, and her relationship with two other tennis players, as well as their stories sort of intertwine, and that they were partners at once, and then she was with both of them at once. It sort of is like a love triangle sort of thing, but with the backdrop of tennis. You know, that's one of the, obviously the biggest things of the movie is this tennis match going on along with it. So I thought that it was incredibly creative, the way they told this story, the way they interweave the different timelines that are going on. They sort of go back in time, they go forward, they go present day. They're all over the place, almost like a Pulp Fiction type of thing where they're flashing back and forth and present day. So you don't really know where it's going. And there's a lot of good, tense moments. Amazing soundtrack. I really do love the Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor. They do great soundtracks. This is one of them. It's very stylish and sleek and cool. I really like that. Very memorable aspect. Great cinematography as well. Some really cool use of camera angles and going how it pans back and forth when they're playing tennis and stuff like that. Very creative. Definitely one of the more unique movies this year. I definitely like this high pace, you know, romantic but sleek journey into tennis and stuff. So I really enjoyed it, honestly. It's not perfect by any means. It did leave a little bit to be desired at certain moments, but looking at it as a whole, I did really enjoy it. So I'm going to be putting Challengers up at the B+ tier, bordering on an A. Alright, so next we have Joker Folie or Joker 2 if you want to be more traditional. So obviously there was a lot of hype around this movie, and being a fan of the first one, I was like, okay, they're bringing Lady Gaga in and they're doing something unique with it. They're going for a musical aspect. So I was like, alright, so this is going to be interesting. And then the reviews started coming out. People said it was horrible, this and that, yada yada. Eventually I saw it. This is what I think of it. So Joker 2 follows the aftermath of Joker 1 and continues with Arthur Fleck and kind of what's going on with him in present day. He meets Lady Gaga's character, Harley. I'm sure you know who she's supposed to be, but anyways. Yeah, meets her, and then there's musical elements in it. It's sort of like a courtroom drama mixed with a musical, mixed with a just straight drama. So it's kind of just all over the place. And tonally, it's just not there. And somewhere in this movie is actually a good movie. Somewhere in there is a tight continuation of the first one, because there are glimpses. The movie looks great. There's some really cool cinematography, some cool camera angles, a cool one take later on, some unexpected moments as well. So there's all these elements that could be a good movie, but they decided to focus on all the wrong things. They didn't have such a clear-cut story. It seems to be very jumbled. It feels messy. You aren't able to really relate or at least get immersed with any of anything that's going on. And this relationship between the two leads, it's not even believable. And the musical aspect is awkward and weird because they don't really use the environment to tell the musical, or to add on to the musical element of it. So usually in musicals, you have the background people helping in. It's usually a theatrical thing, but there were no theatrics. It's just singing at random moments. And that doesn't add anything. It just makes it feel weird, disconjointed. It feels like it doesn't know what it wants to be. I think the very end of the movie is a good ending. I do like the very end of it. I think that it's very creative what they do with it. It's very unexpected. So I give them props for doing that, but I don't know. It totally falls flat on its face in a lot of different ways. And again, it's a shame because it has potential. I didn't hate the movie. I didn't think it was terrible, but it's just the potential that it could have had that really just they blew it. Honestly, they blew it. So hopefully, I don't know if they're ever going to touch this again, but you know, whatever they decide to do, if they even continue this story somehow. And if you saw this movie, you'd probably understand that it may be hard to do that, maybe not, but I don't know. The Joker Folie goes in the D plus tier. Could have been a C if they did a little bit better, but now I'm going to keep it there. Next we have Heretic. So Heretic is an A24 horror movie. It's about two young missionaries that end up visiting an older man's home to try to recruit him to the church that they're part of. And what ends up happening is this weird cat and mouse game between this very smart but very sadistic older gentleman played by Hugh Grant. So this movie was one of the most interesting and well-written movies of this year. I thought that the dialogue, the premise, everything was incredibly sharp, incredibly unique, incredibly well-written. And whether you're religious or not, this is absolutely such a thought-provoking movie in every sense of the word. I think that Hugh Grant should do more horror movies because he did an excellent job with this one. He's charming, but also what he's doing is also very sinister as well. And the leads were great as well. Chloe East and Sophie Thatcher, they do a great job as well. All three of the actors have great chemistry with each other. And again, this movie's so sharp and it just keeps you on the edge of your seat. It sucks you in. It really all takes place in one house, you know? So it's not like there's a lot going on, but it still is able to keep your attention. It's still able to sort of do some sharp right turns and stuff like that. So I thought that this movie was really good. I enjoyed it when I first saw it, and it's not perfect. They've got some pacing issues later on, and I wish they would have focused more on the game aspect of it, because there's sort of this game aspect that they have going on. I wish they had gone more into that. That would have been even more interesting. But the very end is very, very, very thought-provoking. So I give them a lot of props for that. I give them credit. I think this is very creative and very entertaining. So I'm going to give Heretic an A. And the more I think about the movie, the more I enjoyed it. So yeah, this one definitely deserves to be in the A tier. Alright, so next up we have Alien Romulus. So Alien Romulus is one of many Alien movies that came out, and this one hoped to bring on a new concept. Alien Romulus takes place between, I believe, the first and second movie, if I'm not mistaken. It is basically the exact same sort of premise as all the Alien movies. Honestly, I think that this one has some pretty cool ideas, some pretty cool moments. I thought that the whole way they navigated around the low gravity, no gravity kind of situations, and some of the cool elements at the very end of the movie, I thought were pretty cool. But I don't know, I feel like all these Alien movies always end the same way, and this one just was like okay at best. It wasn't bad, but it just kind of left a lot to be desired, to be honest. I thought that with such an iconic series and a lot of different ways to make it fresh and unique, I think that Alien Romulus just doesn't really fulfill that much. I think that it's just it's very mid, if you will. So I didn't think it was all that crazy. It's very generic. So it wasn't terrible. I don't think I'd put it in D tier, but I'm putting it at C minus. C minus for sure. I think it's just right there in the middle. Alright, so next up we have Megalopolis. So without a doubt, the weirdest movie I saw this year. The strangest just amalgamation of visual, story, and all that. So Francis Ford Coppola is the director. He's infamous or famous for Apocalypse Now, the Godfather series. He's definitely claimed Dracula. I mean, he's out there. You know what I mean? He funded this movie basically all on his own. So big props to him. He had a vision. He stuck with it and has a lot of known actors in it as well. Adam Driver's in the front. Giancarlo Esposito, Jon Voight, Shia LaBeouf, Aubrey Plaza. The list goes on and on. It's just a lot of different actors in this one. It's an ensemble cast. It's a long movie. It follows an architecture basically in the future. Sort of tells like the Roman following the Roman Empire sort of situation. And I don't know, it's just, the visuals are so odd. I felt like I was tripping on acid while I was watching this movie in the weirdest way. Some of the scenes feel awkward, the writing is strange, the acting is not great. The whole entire story, the biggest failure is the story. It feels like you're just going scene to scene, nothing's connected in between them. It's trying to be ambitious and it's super unique, don't get me wrong. I mean, this is unlike anything I've ever seen, but not really in the best way. And it just fails on a lot of things just because it doesn't have a coherent storyline. It doesn't have characters you really care about. The story sort of unfolds kind of messily. A lot of random thrown in visual sequences that really add nothing to the movie. Just a lot of things that I didn't like about it. So, unfortunately, and again, I give him a lot of props for funding this himself, putting up the money for it, sticking with his vision, doing what he wanted to do. I give him props for that. He's definitely a acclaimed director, but this just isn't it, Francis Ford. So, I'm sorry, I gotta do it. Megalopolis goes in the F tier. Have to do it. Next, we have Longlegs. So, this came out sort of mid last year at some point. It's a horror movie. It was touted as one of the scariest movies of all time. It's definitely not. But it's got some very, very effective moments in it. Nicolas Cage is in the movie. He's one of the more iconic, I guess, infamous sort of characters in the movie. So this movie basically tells the story of a serial killer by the name of Longlegs that is killing families, full families. And the detective Lee Harker is put on the case to sort of try to figure out what is happening with these murders, how there's barely any evidence left behind and all this stuff. Like, they're not able to figure out what is happening here. So Lee Harker, she goes in, that's the character's name. She goes in and that's basically the premise. She has to figure out what's going on here. So it definitely plays out sort of like your Sevens, kind of those kind of movies. Zodiac, movies where they're trying to figure out. Silence of the Lambs, also that's one that I would highly compare to, but it kind of plays out like that. You know, she's interviewing, she's getting to the bottom of it. So Nicolas Cage's character is Longlegs. He's pretty creepy. They sort of like more like they put like plastic surgery on his face. It looks like the character, so it's kind of creepy. He has a very high-pitched voice. There's some very effective scenery, very effective visuals in it as well. So for that, I give it props. I thought the ending was a bit silly. I thought it was a bit dumb the way it goes about it, and it was pretty predictable, honestly, what happens. And I wish they just would have done more with the Longlegs character. It just ended up being a little more weird than I would have liked, and leaving a little more that they could have done with it. So this movie's not bad though. I didn't mind it, and the visuals are great too. The acting's really good. Visuals are really good as well. It's a unique vision. Personally, I think Longlegs goes, well, I put it at a C+. C+, bordering on a B. Yeah, I think that's all right. Wow, look, a lot of red in the C category. All right, next we have Quiet on Set. So I know technically this is like a mini series. It's 3 episodes, I believe. So I'm just gonna count it as a movie. Quiet on Set basically is a documentary. It tells the story of Dan Schneider, along with a couple of other executives at Nickelodeon when they were doing the big shows back then, like Drake and Josh and the Amanda Show and all those kind of shows, and the creepy and very inappropriate behavior that happened behind the scenes. This is a very dark documentary. It's very visceral. It's very unsettling, especially when you are being told from the first-hand accounts of the child actors that this happened to, Drake Bell and others, along with other people who worked at Nickelodeon that saw things happen. So, you know, how much validity is there to this? Dan Schneider was actually suing the documentary for defamation, so there's that. But definitely some of the stuff that happened behind the scenes with Drake Bell and all that, it's disturbing, as it is completely, utterly unacceptable that ever happened. All the warning signs and all that. So it's a tough watch, but pretty well executed overall. I wouldn't say it was entertaining or anything like that, but for a documentary, it does its job. I think it's right in the middle. C+. It's like, I can't justify B because I just kind of like forgot a little bit about it later on. Or it was a little forgettable, to be honest. Not what happened, but like the actual documentary itself. And it just, I don't know, I would never rewatch it or anything like that. So it's, you know, it's your typical documentary like that. C. So next we have MaXXXine. So this is the 3rd movie out of the X Pearl trilogy. So those are 2 great horror movies, all by the same director, Ty West. And when I saw X and Pearl, both of them, I thought that they were great movies. I was so excited that they were taking MaXXXine into the 80s. I was like, this would be awesome. 80s LA, a crime sort of thriller. And this movie obviously follows our lead character, MaXXXine, as she tries to break into the Hollywood scene, all while there's this killer going rampant in LA during this time. So it's sort of like that's the kind of premise of it. And meanwhile, she's trying to make it big, but also there's these murders going on at the same time that kind of are like correlated to her in a way. So that's the general premise. This movie was such a disappointment. I was so dumbfounded by Ty West and the writers having done such a great job on X and Pearl, and then coming into this one and just losing all of the good things that made the others so great. They just left it all behind. They ruined it. They absolutely ruined this character. They ruined the movie. I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't. The last half of this movie is awful. They totally lose their marbles. The end and the end portion, they wrap this movie up. Doesn't make any sense. Horrible climax, horrible conclusion, terrible acting at the end. They just threw something together. I don't know why. Again, it's very stylistic. There's some good moments, but really a disappointment through and through. And it kills me to say, because again, I love the other 2, and I don't know what happened with this one, but they dropped the ball on so many different levels. All I could say is that the music is good, the acting is good up until the end, and some of the visuals are nice, and there's some interesting premises in there as well, but I don't know, this one falls flat on so many levels. It's terrible, honestly. I don't know what they were doing. The end is terrible. The movie's mid up until the end, then it's terrible. So this one goes at a D as well. It's so disappointing. Next we have Dune Chapter 2, or Part 2. So this movie's being revered as a masterpiece. This movie is revered as the best of the year. I'm going to be honest with you. I really do like the movie, but I'm not going to say it's the best movie of the year. Personally, the Dune franchise, the Dune aesthetic, the Dune story, I like it. I'm into it, but it doesn't really resonate with me as much as it does other people. People are diehard fans. They love this franchise. They love the story. They like the first movie. They love the second movie. And I think that Dune 2 is such a quality movie. Honestly, it is. I'm just saying that it doesn't resonate with me as much as other people. But with that being said, though, going to my thoughts on the movie, I think the movie's very good. I think that it has excellent cinematography, great acting, a very appropriate and very good soundtrack from Hans Zimmer. So again, it's a very quality movie, one of the best quality movies of this year. So I enjoyed it. I thought that the performances were good. This one obviously follows the aftermath of Dune Part 1 and fleshes out more of the characters. A lot of big names in this one, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good cinematic experience. I thought it was great watching it on the big screen. So Dune Part 2 gets an A- for me. That's where I'm gonna put it. Nowhere higher than that. A- for me. I think that's good. Good place to put it. All right, next is Borderlands the movie. So I think this is my favorite movie of the year. Honestly, it's so good. I'm kidding. This movie's terrible. Horrible movie. So it's based off of the Borderlands video game, which basically takes 4 vault hunters basically as they go on this mission, and it's known for its kooky characters and crazy enemies and millions of weapons. So obviously it has its own aesthetic and visually, so this movie is based off of the game obviously, so it follows the same sort of premise, same sort of characters. It isn't really like based on any one specific game. It kind of takes elements from each of them, but this brings all these different characters together, this ragtag team of vault hunters played by God knows why Cate Blanchett and Jamie Lee Curtis were in this movie, 2 goated actresses, and they somehow ended up in this trash movie along with Kevin Hart, and then Jack Black, which, by the way, Kevin Hart way miscasted on that. He doesn't look like his character at all. Doesn't sound like his character. His character was supposed to be Roland, this sort of macho military man. Kevin Hart, not even close to being that. And then Jack Black, great actor. Great actor. He was the best in the movie as Claptrap. But nobody wanted to be here. Nobody wanted to do this. It's probably one of the most boring movies you could possibly get to. I have no idea why on earth they butchered this. Eli Roth once again came in and just, I don't know what he's doing, but this movie is so bad on so many levels. Super boring, terrible graphics later on, ending is horrible, super cliche, really cheesy moments, terrible writing, terrible acting. The world that they built, like the set designs, are really good, and Claptrap looks exactly like Claptrap. It's accurate in that way they look, but everything from casting, acting, just everything I just named, bad. Borderlands gets an F right next to Megalopolis, second, if not the worst movie of the year. Next up, we have Inside Out 2, the sequel to Inside Out. So, for those of you who haven't seen Inside Out 1, it basically animates the feelings of a person. So in a way, it sort of treats the emotions in a person's mind and brain as particular characters. So there's angry, there's sadness, there's joy. Each of those characters represent those emotions. So it's incredibly creative. It's incredibly ageless. It's timeless. Anybody can relate to it. It really focuses on this little girl called Riley, and she's a little older now in this movie, and it kind of continues the same sort of story, but they go with a whole different approach in the sense that new emotions are introduced. So he's introduced, and Inu, I believe, and other embarrassment, just different emotions are introduced to the already lineup that they had, because she's already entering the stage of puberty, she's entering the stage of growing up in, middle school, high school, that sort of area. So it's really creative how they sort of introduce these new characters and see how they interact with the other characters that are already there, like joy and sadness, like the stock one. So it kind of continues her story. It's really, really, really well done. Super creative. I love what they do with the movie. I loved Inside Out 1. This one's also great. It takes these characters, again, on this crazy journey, and it really just is something that a lot of people can resonate with. So, again, a great Pixar movie. Classic, honestly, classic feel to it. Yeah, great movie. Great movie. Inside Out, definitely A+. A+ tier, bordering on an S. Really, really good. Alright, next up we have Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. So, this is sort of a weird and strange reboot, remake, whatever you want to call it. Requel. That's more specific. Yeah, requel, reboot, sequel for Beetlejuice. I'm not entirely sure why they decided to touch this movie in particular. So it kind of follows the original leads of the original movie, but now grown up, and now it's the daughter of Winona Ryder's character in the movie as well, played by Jenna Ortega, and Michael Keaton's still Beetlejuice, and Winona Ryder's still her character. But I don't know, this movie was very odd. It totally missed the mark on trying to continue the same sort of vibe and fun nature of the first one. This one does not do that. This one, it feels odd, it feels rushed. This movie it felt like it finished before it even began. It's very lackluster, really awkward moments. I don't know why they decided to... It almost didn't even have a storyline, honestly. It just it ended super quickly. Some of the characters are there for 1 second, then they're gone. Michael Keaton did a good job. Winona Ryder did alright. But I don't know. This one's just an odd case. Very forgettable. Left a lot more to be desired. Not terrible. Not one of the worst I've seen of this year, but just not great. Not really great. I don't know. Entertaining, sort of, but as a movie, just failed. Beetlejuice goes at the C tier. C minus. C minus tier. I don't know if it's as bad as a D, but it's getting there. Alright, so next up we have Smile 2. So Smile 2 was an interesting sequel to Smile 1, and for those of you who didn't watch Smile 1, it's basically the premise is that somebody witnesses a traumatic murder, or rather, someone witnesses a traumatic death, self-inflicted death of a person, basically, so like a suicide, and they witness that, and when they witness that, they get possessed with a demon, the Smile Demon, and then they end up completely losing their mind, basically. So that's basically the premise. It's a very unique premise, but what I loved about the first one was the execution of it. I thought that they executed it very well. It's very unique, very memorable. So when they announced the second one, I was like, okay, let's see what they do. So this one follows a pop star, and she gets possessed with the demon, obviously. But this movie is excellent. I truthfully think this is one of the best movies of the year. One of the best horror movies I've seen in the last 5 years, honestly. This movie's so tight, so sharp, incredible camera usage, incredible acting. Naomi Scott, the lead actress, does a phenomenal job. Super creative premise, taking this into sort of a pop star's life. So creative doing that. I thought it was excellent, honestly, excellent stuff. And everything from the music to the acting to the visuals, the deaths, the kills are incredibly visceral, but incredibly effective. You really do feel like you're losing your mind, just like the character. And the transitions are so good. And one of the best openings as well for a horror movie, honestly, of this year. So just great on all angles. I really don't even know what to take off. I love this movie. I saw it twice. It's really dark and depressing, but it's so good. It's so good. So big props, honestly, to the creators and the actors. Yeah, Smile is S tier. Smile 2 is S tier. Next we have Wicked, based off of the super popular musical by the same name. So Wicked basically is a musical that follows the sort of backstory of the Wicked Witch of the West from Wizard of Oz. So it's sort of set in that universe. And, Oz, the wizard himself, is in the movie, or is in the musical. And we follow Galinda and Elphaba as our two leads. Elphaba is basically the Wicked Witch of the West, and Elphaba is the princess, I believe. So this movie, I was a little skeptical. I'm wasn't a huge fan of what I was hearing about the actresses, Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo, but this movie's really good, actually. I really enjoyed it. I thought that the actual set design, set pieces, they actually made those from scratch, and it looks stunning. Later on in the movie, when they go to the Emerald City, beautiful, some of the best visuals that you'll see this year. And I think that the two actresses, Cynthia Erivo or Ariana Grande, do an excellent job singing the songs. They both have phenomenal voices. They have good chemistry with each other. A lot of the characters are very good as well. Totally to steal the show, basically. And the end portion, the climax of the movie, the big number, defying gravity, one of the best sequences of this past year. Honestly, just a phenomenal job. Besides one little critique I would have with it, it's phenomenal. A great end to a movie. So I really enjoyed it. I was entertained. I didn't feel like it dragged at all. It was quick. The number set pieces, the music numbers are great. Great little Easter eggs for those who like Wizard of Oz or the original musical. Great stuff in there. Thoroughly enjoyed this one. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Bordering on an S, but I'm going to be putting this up at an A+ tier. Very, very good. All right, next we have Terrifier 3. So this is hands down the goriest movie of the year. Obviously, Terrifier basically tells the story of a killer clown by the name of Art the Clown. He's demonic, and he basically just goes on a rampage. That's the movie. That's the first, the second, and the third movie. This one's set in a Christmas theme, so this is almost like a Christmas slasher, basically. He's basically dressed up as Santa half the time and during the holiday season, but the grotesque meter on this movie is above the others, the second and the first one, and those are considered some of the goriest horror movies, mainstream horror movies of all time. So that should tell you what kind of level of gore we're dealing with here. If you don't like gore, then never ever watch any of the Terrifier movies. Brutal, absolutely brutal, the stuff that he does. But yeah, it follows Sienna, which is, this young woman and her brother and her family, and basically the aftermath of the second movie. And then Art just does what he does, basically. There's not much of a storyline to it. There's quite a bit of kills in it. It does leave a lot to be desired, though. I wish the ending was a little different. I wish they had done something a little different as well. But I don't know. The acting is very good from Sienna and obviously Art the Clown. The other actors in the movie are okay, but they could have done something really special with this one. But I feel like there's not much of a story going on here. They definitely try to build more of the story element, but that's sort of lacking, and it just ends up being another kill fest. Which, we're there for the kills, but also at least have some sort of story going on as well. Maybe make it a little more interesting, something related to Art. This one just left me kind of wanting more, and I kind of like the second one better than this one. They up the kills a lot. They up the ante, obviously, so give them props for that. But yeah, I just wish it was a little more. So I'll be putting Terrifier 3. I wanted to put it at B. It's a C+, honestly. It leaves a little bit to be desired. All right, next we have Am I Racist? So this is a documentary by the Daily Wire, hosted by Matt Walsh. So, not to get political or anything here, but this was basically kind of looking at the DEI, so it basically kind of criticizes the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Act, or not act, but basically idea, DEI. So yeah, it's basically a Matt Walsh kind of going undercover as sort of this snowflake kind of type of DEI expert, if you will, and he basically takes the role to see basically what's happening with race in America, basically, and what some people are trying to do, victimize it, and while others don't care about it. And it just kind of looks at both sides, mainly the other more woke side of it. I thought this was you know, it definitely gave the vibe of like a YouTube, like I could see this just on YouTube as opposed to a full-blown theatrical documentary. So the quality's good, but it's not like that crazy. You know what I mean? It's not the craziest quality I'm expecting. It's not, you're not expecting to see, you're just expecting to see a little more in that sense. But yeah, I think that Matt Walsh does this typical sort of like deadpan sort of brand of comedy, brand of politics. I liked this movie. I thought that it brought some pretty good points up. I thought that it was pretty entertaining. It's a little cheesy. It gets kind of out of hand later on in the movie. Almost loses credibility and believability at times. But, you know, there's some good moments in it. I think it's okay. You know, not the best documentary I saw this year, but pretty decent. I'd put it C+. You know, it is what it is. This would have been probably better as a short rather than a full 2-hour movie. There's some cheesy moments, but yeah, it kind of is what it is. All right, next we have Deadpool and Wolverine. So this was highly anticipated last year, and obviously the Deadpool movies are extremely popular, and they've been wanting Wolverine to make a comeback after Logan. It'd been quite some time, and people were really happy to see him return. And so was I. I think Hugh Jackman is excellent actor, and he's great as Wolverine. And this movie delivers pretty much on all fronts in terms of what you'd come to expect in a Deadpool movie. I like the Deadpool 1 and 2. I think they're really fun for what they are. If accepted as for what they are, they're great. Very entertaining, very funny. They're very meta, very in your face, very cartoonish, but that's just how Deadpool is. So this one kind of takes that all up into a whole nother level with Wolverine in it, along with so many other metaverses and all this kind of stuff going on. They use all kinds of cool IPs. So it's a really, really fun watching this, seeing who's coming up on the screen, who's going to come up next. You have no idea, because they have rights to all these kind of things, you know, so like Marvel, Universal, like they have all these kind of different, you know, Marvel, Disney, they have all these different types of IPs at their disposal, so we're able to see a lot of the stuff from Marvel in there as well. So it's really cool in that sense. I think the chemistry between these two is great. Wolverine's sort of this hard-laced, hard shell sort of guy, and Deadpool is just all over the place, won't shut up. So it's funny seeing this dynamic that they have going on, and it's really cool action sequences, really cool moments at the end of the movie, very explosive, great performances, very fun cameos, fun meta jokes, a lot of Easter eggs in there. Just a really, really fun movie. Really enjoyed this one. I think it's great. I put Deadpool and Wolverine up at the A tier, A+ tier, almost bordering on an S. Very, very good. Next, we have Civil War. So this is one of the most underrated movies of the year. I feel like people didn't really talk about this one that much. So A24 made this movie. Alex Garland directed it. So it's one of the most unique plots in the past couple of years that I've seen. So it basically, apart from there obviously being a civil war in the United States in this movie, in this fictional movie, it focuses on the journalists. So you're following Kirsten Dunst, Kaylee Spaney, and just a group of like 4 photographers and journalists trying to make their way to Washington, D.C. That's basically the premise. They're trying to get from point A to B, and they want to get to the White House and reach the president because they want to interview him, basically. So it kind of tells the story through the lens of these photographers, and it's pretty cool, like the press during the Civil War. So instead of like following the soldiers, you're following these people that are just trying to make it across the country to, you know, document this. So that alone is really creative. I think that the cinematography is beautiful. I really like the music as well, and this soundtrack's very good. A lot of very tense moments as they're trying to make their way across the nation, basically. Or they're trying to make their way across several different states to get to Washington, D.C. And in doing so, they come across danger. There's suspenseful moments. There's moments of catastrophe. There's sad moments. There's human moments where they're kind of bonding during this time. A lot of great performances. Kirsten Dunst does a great job. Kaylee Spaney does an excellent job. Everyone's really good in it overall. And then, you know, the ending, it gets a little more action-packed. It gets very much like an action movie. The ending is a little... The ending should have been better. I really do wish that they made the ending more impactful and they did something a little different. It was just a little silly, honestly, the way it ended. And it's unfortunate because this movie's great. So I really wish that they would have... Because the first 3/4 of the movie are excellent. It's that last quarter of the movie, that last little section that kind of falls off the radar a little bit. So because of that, I'm going to be putting Civil War at the B- tier. I think the first 3/4 does carry it enough to make it into the B category. But trust me, if they had done a better ending, this could have been potentially an S tier movie. All right, and... Finally, the last movie that I'm going to do, I know you're seeing Squid Game. Ignore this Conclave down here, but Squid Game, you know, we'll talk about that in a moment. But Nosferatu will be the final movie that I will be talking about for last year. So Nosferatu is a remake of the original Nosferatu story back from the 1920s. And it basically tells this sort of love story between this sort of vampire Dracula, basically, type Count Orlok, as he's called, and his sort of connection and love with this young woman, and the way he possesses her, and the way he's basically demonic, and he's bringing the plague with him, and it's this sort of twisted story of death and love and all that stuff that's going on, and possession, basically. A lot of possession in the movie. Great performances, honestly. Lily Depp is excellent in the movie. Bill Skarsgård plays Nosferatu himself. I think he's very good in the movie as well. He's good at playing sort of those evil, demonic sort of entities. The people I watched the movie with didn't really like the voice. I thought the voice was very good for this sort of Dracula type. He definitely had that accent that he needed for it, and it made it iconic. So, you know, the visuals are excellent. Roger Eggers, the director, you know, he's known for his period pieces like The Witch and The Lighthouse. So this is no different. And this, as a period piece, excellent. You know, the actual period of it, the design, the visual, cinematography, beautiful. The coloring almost has this black and white look to it, almost very faded out, grayed out, similar to the original. So I don't know if it's a nod to that, but it fits perfectly with the movie. I will say, though, that this one did feel like it started to drag a little bit. There's certain moments where I feel like they could have used their screen time more effectively. And the ending, I just wish was a little better. I like the ending, don't get me wrong, but they were missing just something to really drive it home. And the movie being as long as it is, I wish that, I don't know, I wish it was a little more entertaining for what it was. So I enjoyed it. I just don't see the masterpiece that some people were seeing in it. But again, it's pretty decent though. So I'm going to be giving it a B-. This gets a B-, barely, but it's there, a B-. Solid. You might like it, might not. Alright, then I had Squid Game 2 here to just say, please check out my review of Squid Game Part 2 if you want to see that. And then Conclave, I also have it here because I made a video on the end of that movie. If you want to check those out, please hit videos on the screen right now. And if you want to see more like this, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you very much for watching, and let me know what your favorite movie of 2024 was. See you next time.